chapter here. We're celebrating with Steve Rosen, of course, the author of Tonechaser, the amazing new audiobook. And I know it was long and hard, Steve, to come up with how you were going to do it, if you were going to do it, just like the book. This is so special to you, your conversations with Edward, and now you have the tapes. And I know a lot of them were done on very primitive cassette recorders. Tell us about the process of, putting this, audiobook together where you felt you could make it the best it could be.
Well, it was a long, extraordinarily difficult process. So back around, I want to say 2015, maybe, I was writing for this little website called rock.com. And I was talking to one of the guys there, and we came to an agreement. And I actually put up some of my audio, very short excerpts, probably like 15 minutes. And one of them was an excerpt from a Van Halen interview. That was probably the first time I'd ever put anything up online. And then I was talking to some guys like, hey man, you should get a YouTube channel. I am a technology Luddite. I don't understand it. I don't know how to use it. I barely know how to post stuff. Man, I'm good. Just give me a Word doc, and that's about the extent of my knowledge about that stuff. But I had some guys who understood how to put together a YouTube page. And so we put that together. And I guess I've had that now, I don't know, 5-6 years, hard to remember. And I started putting up more complete pieces of some of the Van Halen interviews. And the response was amazing. I mean, it was attracting a lot of eyeballs. I also put up a lot of my other stuff I thought people would dig. There's a Jeff Beck interview up there, Jimmy Page. I think there's some Kiss guys up there, some more modern guys, John Frusciante, some of the guys from Blink. And the response was great. I mean, I was given this front row seat, to meeting all of these extraordinary artists, and Edward Van Halen was one of them. But for the longest time, those interviews were for my ears only. I was recording them because I would then sit down and take my cheap little tape player and rewind the tape and sit there and listen to what I recorded so I could write a story from it, so I could pull out the quotes.
Yeah, transcribe it.
Right. They were never, ever meant. And I don't think anybody even thought about it in 78. Oh, yeah, man, people are going to want to hear your audio. I mean, the guys I was interviewing, they never said, wow, man, I bet you, 40 years from now, they're going to listen to this interview. And nobody ever said it. No one, it was just not on anybody's radar. So no, it was never intended for anybody else to hear. And at a point in time, it became more than that. It was like, you know what, this is my life. This is what I've done. This is my football. You guys can't play. I'm going to keep this, it's my game. I'll write the stories and you could read those, but everything else is mine. I don't want you peeking behind the curtains and hearing me talk to these people. It was just so private. I just couldn't imagine letting that stuff out. But slowly I was talking to some friends who go, man, I know you interviewed Jeff Beck in 75. Man, Beck fans would love to hear that stuff. And that's what resonated with me. Again, I had this amazingly unique opportunity to sit there and talk with Beck in 75 and talk to Jimmy Page in 77 and David Gilmour and Pete Townsend. And those moments were obviously gone. No one was going to talk to Pete Townsend again, 20 years later in 1978. Someone would talk to him in 1998 and he might remember what happened in 78, but it's a totally different experience to my mind. What has not value, but what seems to have more attraction is, yeah, he's there. It's, the kids are all right. The movie and the record are just released, and he's talking about it in real time. That to me has a lot more attraction than if he talks about it 20 years later. That's just me. So I'm sitting in all these interviews, and I thought, okay, a YouTube channel, that's good, So I put up some of the Van Halen interviews, and the response was amazing. 2020, I sit down to write the book. I complete the book in 2021. The 3 editions come out. The 3rd edition just came out this past March, 2024. Back in 2023, probably August, September, the idea for an audiobook came up again. I don't know what prompted it. I have a friend, Adam Roach. Adam is like my guy in Australia. Adam would ultimately clean all of the audio. He puts up all the audio on my YouTube channels. I trust this guy implicitly. And maybe he had mentioned it because as he's cleaning, I know these other interviews, he's listening to them. And he was a big fan. You know, he's a great guitar player.
Right.
And maybe he suggested, man, well, what about an audiobook? You know, the Tonechaser book, you know, the hardback is out. What about an audiobook? I said, man, I don't know. And I kicked it around and I thought, well, okay. And my first instinct was, you know, let me find somebody to narrate it. Because 1, I didn't want to narrate it. 2, I didn't think I'd be capable of narrating it. And 3, I didn't think I'd do a very good job. So I looked around, you know, and I see, you know, there's millions of these people out there doing this professionally. I'm sure they're all amazing. But, you know, I wanted somebody who knew who Van Halen was, who knew who Edward Van Halen was, had listened to those records. To me, that was an important part of it. Maybe it had nothing to do with their performance, but I believe if they knew who he was and they knew about my book, they would have brought more to it. And I thought, you know, I'm never going to find that kind of person. So that's when I thought, well, maybe I can narrate it. So I thought, okay, I'm going to narrate it. But what makes the book difficult is there are lots of interviews in there where it's me asking a question and Edward's response. And I thought, well, okay, I can read my question. That's going to make sense. But then in my voice, I'm reading Edward's response. I just thought that it rang so hollow to me. It just felt so clumsy. And I could have done a good job, you know. I mean, not that I could mimic the way he talked. I wouldn't try to do that. But his speech patterns and the cadence, I mean, I heard enough. I could make it believable and it would have been good. But to me, it was missing something. So then I thought, well, what if I embed some of the actual interviews I did with Edward back in the day? I sit there and I listen to the cassettes and I get that stuff and I get it to Adam and we pull out little bits and pieces and we add those to the book. I'm thinking that could be unbelievable. I have never, ever heard of any other audiobook doing that, where there's a narration and typically the author is narrating, right? But it's embedded. If the author is narrating a book on John Wayne, you actually have audio from John Wayne or any musician. I'm not aware of it. I've never been aware of it. I thought, wow, this could be really interesting. And at first, like I said, I was just gonna embed a few little pieces here and there. And then I'm listening to it and I'm going, oh my God, that part is amazing. And oh my God, that part's amazing. And I thought, okay, let's do this. So what occurred is me, after I wrote the book, I had all the cassettes. I tried to label them more clearly. A lot of those cassettes originally weren't labeled other than it said Edward Van Halen. There was no dates. I had no idea. As I was going through the book, I would listen to this tape just labeled Edward Van Halen. And I'd listen, and he says, yeah, man, on the Fair Warning tour 6 months ago. I go, oh, so that's whenever the Fair Warning tour would have been.
81.
So I reverse engineered thinking, okay, so this has to be, 81, late 80 sometime. So I had all of those notes that I would pass to Adam. I sent him all of this stuff on WeTransfer, and he sat there for hours and days and weeks and months cleaning and editing and dehissing and normalizing and mixing and bringing the levels up. And again, we have to go back. I was using the worst cassette player in existence. I think it was like a GE. I mean, this thing
was, or like a Radio Shack or something.
Oh, exactly. But I think it was a Radio Shack mic, but I can never remember buying them. we used to hold rummage sales in our garage, like for the neighborhood. It would be like a rummage sale either for the temple or for the school. But my parents uh, made the garage the place where people would come and bring all their stuff. So I remember there would be like boxes, you know, clothes and stuff. And I think I was looking through one of the boxes one day, and I found this cassette player and maybe the microphone. And that's how I got it. I mean, I wasn't even professional enough to go and buy a Radio Shack cassette player for $29.99 or whatever it would have cost.
But
so,
it took regular size cassettes. These weren't like the micro cassettes.
No, regular size cassettes.
Okay.
But even then, man, I used to go to this store. It was like a precursor to like Target or Walmart, much smaller. But upstairs they would have like groceries. Downstairs they would have stereo section and furniture. You know, kind of a catch-all. I remember they had like a little guitar section. They sold like, you know, these really, really at the time cheap Kent, you know, these Japanese, you know, electric guitars that I was fascinated by. I thought they were amazing. And I remember they would sell like 3 cassettes in a this like plastic package for $1. And those are the cassettes I used seriously for like the first 5 or 10 years of my journalism career. So yes, so the cassettes, again, the quality, and again, the quality was never meant for anybody to hear. Some of the cassettes weren't great. Adam did what he could to clean them up. A lot of the cassettes, later on, I got a Sony Pro Walkman. The quality improved greatly.
You digitized the cassettes, or he did?
No, I actually, I don't know. I can't remember if I sent him. Yeah, so I think I sent him, the cassettes were digitized to a CD, and I may have sent him the files from a CD.
Okay.
So yeah,
you had to digitize them all, and then he started cleaning them up and putting them in order.
Yeah. If he had to digitize them, my God, we would still be working on it to this day. So yeah, so some of the quality isn't great, but I think in a way, I mean, you have to understand, man, that first interview was 88, 98, that's 46 years old.
Yeah, almost 47 years ago.
Right. I'm lucky that the tapes were even in a condition that I was able, because I wrote the book listening to the cassettes, the first generation, because they were just easier for me to manipulate than a CD, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, as I'm playing them, I'm going, oh my God, please don't let this tape break. Don't let it crumble, fall apart, oxidize, blah, blah, blah. So just the fact that I had all the cassettes that were still usable is a miracle. But I think part of the, I don't know, man, the uniqueness, the charm is that you're hearing the actual interview on a tape that cost the writer 34 cents, recorded in 78 with a cheap microphone. You know, and that's what you're hearing. And now if you have the book, you can kind of use the book as a read along and, oh, that's what he said. But again, a lot of the quality is really good. So it took us, we started, I think I probably started sending him the audio around September or October. That's when I started doing my narration. I found someone who lived literally 5 minutes away from me here in Lake Forest, Tanner Poppet, who's a musician, and he had like a little studio out in his garage. And I'd go over there probably twice a week, and we'd record for 3 or 4 hours and, you know, try to get through a couple chapters a day. And it was not easy. I'm a voracious reader. I read a lot of books. It's totally different when what you're reading, you now have to say out loud. It's just a completely different experience. I actually have a more of an appreciation for these people who do this professionally. They come in and they haven't probably seen the book, and they do it, you know, cold. But you know, I'd be reading, and it's kind of like my mind. I know what I'm reading because I've written it, but it's almost like you're playing by ear and not reading the music. You're sort of like looking ahead because you kind of know what's coming, but you can't do that because you have to read each word. I mean, it was a weird phenomenon that happened, but I would find myself, man, stumbling over words repeatedly. There was words that I could not pronounce properly. What were some of the words? Irregular. It was like these words that would come out
Yeah.
weird. Or I'd see a word, and in my mind, it was guitar when it was really said giant or something. I mean, it was just weird. So I would, come to a place, and I'd make a mistake, and it would make me insane. And I would scream and I go, "You fucking idiot, Rosen." I've always been like that. It's like, you cannot even read what you wrote, dude. And I'd get crazy, and Tana would say, "Hey, just go back, take it up online before." I mean, there weren't a lot of mistakes, but they were made. And we do have like blooper cassettes.
Uh-huh.
And stuff. So maybe I'll put that out one day. But it really was challenging. It took me, man, I want to say it took me 4 or 5 months to get through it.
Wow.
Yeah,
How long is the audiobook? What's the duration?
it's a good question, man. It's 30 hours, 30 minutes long.
Wow.
Most audiobooks are about a third of that length. So it's a long audiobook. I think people are going to hear the, Edward's voice. And again, in the book, the reason it took me 580 pages is I'd spent 3 pages on describing, how Edward sounded that day and how was his voice, and, was he in a good mood? And it takes a lot of paragraphs to write about this moment that only you see, and to be able to describe it well enough that readers can visualize it. Well, all of that gets erased, when he talks, and you're going to read what I wrote, and you go, "Oh yeah, that's what this Steve was talking about," and yeah, that's what Edward did. And parts when he would pick up the guitar and just start playing, and I'm trying to describe what he's playing. That's a really difficult thing to do. And yeah, the vibrato bar, man, and these riffs that he was just coming up with, and kind of similar to blah blah blah. But now you're hearing this stuff. I think those moments alone are worth the price of the book. There's some playing he does on there that are just going to be mind blowing to people. I jam with him. There are a couple times that I actually jam with Edward, where he was playing bass and I was playing guitar. Those bits are amazing. You'll hear Edward Van Halen playing the most amazing bass, and Steve Rosen attempting not to freeze up and keep my fingers from turning to stone, playing alongside Edward Van Halen. But there's really some extraordinary moments. A lot of these conversations are what I call the Twilight tapes. These are the more personal conversations, and those I was actually thinking about leaving out because they're personal, and they're not necessarily music centric. It wasn't about the last tour or what guitar are you playing now. They were just two kind of conversations between
Part of life. Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought, my God, do I put that stuff out? The last thing I wanted to do with my book or the audiobook was to embarrass anybody, was to hurt anybody, to disgrace anybody. In fact, it was the opposite, man. People read the book and they go, "My God, you love the guy." I did love him. It's a 580-page love letter. And I don't mean to be maudlin or goofy about it, but that's what it was. Look, man, I could have written this book real simply. I could have not included any of that private stuff. I could have taken out all the bits that got even a little controversial. I could have written a book just based on those interviews, and it would have been a simple book to write. It wouldn't have been as good as this book. Anyway, those conversations, I think people, my God, they're going to get so much from that. And the title of my book, Understanding Edward, we know Edward Van Halen is an extraordinary musician and changed the world. But maybe you don't know this much about Edward and his family, or the relationship with his brother, or his wife, or how he felt when Wolf was born, or his own playing in a very personal way. So I think people are going to hear it and they're going to just flip. So I'm really proud of what we did.
Yeah, congratulations. It is certainly a labor of love, 30-hour plus audiobook narrated by the author, Steve Rosen. Of course, Tonechaser, the book, quite an epic tale of Edward Van Halen and all involved. Steve, it's just always a pleasure to talk to you. We love the insights into the book into your conversations with Edward, and certainly the audiobook is groundbreaking. So congratulations to you. We look forward to following up with you and continuing to see everyone find out about this, get their copy, and more importantly, salute the man who put it all together. Thanks so much, Steve.
Thanks so much, Jay. Can I put in one quick plug here?
Yes.
So for those of you who do not have the hardback, you can find it on my website, tonechaserbook.com. One word, tonechaserbook.com. You can find the audiobook on mysoundwise.com. One word, SOUNDWISE.com, mysoundwise.com. And if you've already purchased the hardback, give me a shout. I'll give you a special code. You get a reduced price on the audiobook. So if you buy the audiobook, it's $39.99. If you've already bought the hardback, you get the audiobook for $29.99. And if you want to buy the hardback and the audiobook, it's $79.99. I really tried to keep the pricing what I thought was really fair. You know, I really would love for all you guys to hear it. And yeah, Jay, man, we'll come back on. We'll play some excerpts and we'll talk about some stuff and really dive deep.
All right, tonechaserbook.com. Go get it. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Jay. See you, man.